Chapter 1. The Second Waking. Cold came first. Older than frost, older than cellar stone at dawn. The cold of having been nothing for a long time. And then, without warning, being something again. No body. That settled in the way unwelcome facts do when you've surfaced from deep water. Slowly, then all at once. No hands. No heartbeat to count against the silence. Just presence. Spreading through packed dirt, and the oak beams of a cellar. I knew the way I'd once known my own kitchen, the crack in the east wall, where damp crept in, the low corner I'd always swept last because the lantern didn't reach. My cellar. Wet ash, charred timber, straw burned sweet, the smell of what had been above me. Where the waystation should have stood, the long common room with the hearth I'd stoked every dawn for 7 winters, there was open sky, and a skeleton of blackened joists. Snow had drifted in through the gaps and settled undisturbed. Weeks of it, by the depth. I had burned. I didn't reach for the how. The counting would be easier than the looking, and there was a panel waiting in my awareness like a notice nailed to a post.
Core Awakening. Wren. Dungeon Core. Level 1. Mana Pool. 50 of 50. Influence Radius. 12 meters. Registry Processing.
I read it through. Then again. Core. The word had a system slot I'd never considered. An entry in a ledger I hadn't written. 50 units of mana pooled inside me with a ceiling I could feel the edges of the way you feel walls in the dark. Close and solid. 12 meters in every direction. The cellar, the stairs, a cold margin of earth past the foundation stones. Past that edge, the world simply stopped. I'd once stood at my own front door on foggy mornings and watched the road narrow travelers, from shapes to silhouettes to names, at 50 meters, and then nothing. Now there was no door, no road, no outward watching. Whatever moved out there moved through a darkness I was part of, and I would know nothing of it until it walked down my stairs. The system paused, patient as a clerk letting a bewildered customer finish reading the form, then continued with what I hadn't asked for. Every creature slain inside my influence generated mana, scaled to threat. A wolf-class predator yielded 15 to 20 units. My pool would not fill itself through any other means. I had kept books for 7 years. The waystation accounts, the road taxes, the supply ledgers for a pass, that had stopped being profitable after the second landslide, and kept running anyway because stopping wasn't something I did. I understood what a balance sheet looked like. One entry on the income side, kill what came down my stairs. The travelers' faces came without summons. The merchant whose frostbitten fingers I'd bandaged by lamplight, who'd left me a bolt of autumn cloth at half price by way of thanks. The hunter who turned up 2 days off the road, too proud to name the mountain that had turned him around, and left 3 days later with enough food to reach Halvrest. The one-armed courier who made the same joke about the third stair every autumn and never once explained it. The young soldiers, the old couples, 7 years, and I had never turned anyone away who reached my door. The fire scraped at the edge of thought, a door I had barred against the night, the people I was keeping safe, and the smoke that found them anyway through the cracks, and then the sounds. Gone. I reached and there was nothing. The smell of smoke stayed. Then the fox found my stairs. It came down on 3 legs, the 4th held clear of the stone. Young by the long-legged, underfed look, not yet grown into its own body. A gash ran from shoulder to elbow, dark against pale winter fur, still tracking blood in a line of small drops down each step. The warmth had found it at the edge of my influence, residual heat from 7 years of fires still held in the stones, and pulled it in. At the bottom of the stairs it stopped, stood trembling, and looked at the corner where I'd always kept straw for travelers' dogs on bad nights.
System Alert. Intruder detected. Threat rating. Negligible. Injured. Spike trap available. Cost. 8 mana. Projected yield. 2 mana.
The fox limped to the straw, circled twice in the small ritual animals perform when they're deciding somewhere is safe enough to die or to sleep, and lay down. Its sides heaved in slow, steadying rhythm. 8 mana to kill it for 2 back. A net loss of 6, and an accounting that would begin with killed.
No.
I said. Into nothing, because I had no mouth, and the refusal went nowhere but back into me. I had always known how to refuse things. This was one of them. The system held while I counted the fox's breaths. 3, 7, 10. The panel arrived in the tone of a records clerk noting an exception in the margin.
Notation. This core has declined its first threat yield opportunity. A core that generates no mana does not survive 1 season. System recommends reconsideration.
Reconsideration. I ran the arithmetic. 50 in the pool. Nothing coming in. A pool that would not refill itself through goodwill or stubbornness, or any of the other things I had always run on. Whatever that 50 could buy. A level 1 core. Whatever shaping or building was even possible at the bottom of a burned-out waystation. It had a ceiling, and the ceiling was a number already counting down. The fox breathed. Slow now, steadying. I had kept this waystation running through 4 losing years out of 7. Something below the smoke, below the memory I couldn't reach the end of, was beginning to rhyme with those years in ways I didn't want to look at directly. The memory dissolved before I got there. I didn't follow. Outside my 12 meters, winter pressed down on the pass. The stairs would not stay empty. The system had shown me its only ledger and offered me the first easy entry. I had said no. 6 mana drained into the cold before I learned to hold it back. Warmth bleeding outward without intention. A reflex I hadn't known I had.
Passive seep. 6. Pool. 44 of 50.
A core that would not kill, watching a fox it had refused to spend. I had not yet worked out what I intended to live on. Chapter 2. What the Cellar Remembers. The night passed the way losing nights do, slowly, with too much time to count what wasn't there. 44 mana, 1 fox, 12 meters of cold stone in every direction, and winter pressing on the pass like a thumb. I had kept the waystation running through 4 losing seasons out of 7. I knew the arithmetic of attrition. What I had not yet worked out was the part where I was the ledger now, the principal, the clerk, the only entry that hadn't been struck through. The system didn't volunteer comfort. It had left that first notification sitting open like a bill I'd been reading but not paying.
Warning. A core generating no mana yield will not survive a full season. Threat yield income is recommended.
I'd read it approximately 40 times. The fox's breathing had steadied in the deep of the night. It was tucked into the corner where I'd once kept straw for travelers' dogs, curled small, its wounded flank rising and falling. Alive, but not earning me anything. 44 mana, and no plan that started with killing. So I made a different kind. The schemata unlocked when I pushed my attention outward instead of inward, toward the stone around me rather than the stars I couldn't see. My stone, my walls, the cellar of a waystation that had burned to the eaves and held anyway, because cellars are built to last what the rooms above them cannot. I had always liked that about cellars. The schematic that surfaced first was simple. 1 warm room, stone-walled, with a hearth suggestion at its center. The warmth that comes from walls that have held heat long enough to give it back at night, without flame or flue. 32 mana. More than half of what I had. I held that number. The fox shifted. Its ears moved, dreaming. I poured 32 mana into the walls. It was like reaching toward a shape and missing, the way you miss a step in the dark. Warm floors. The smell of a fire left banked from the night before. Stone that had held its heat through January, and into the shoulder of March when the passes were still locked, and the guests were restless, and someone needed to be the last one awake, making sure the warmth didn't die. I pushed that shape outward, and the cellar did what cellars do when you give them enough of yourself. It listened. The room came together surface by surface, the way frost recedes at the first thin edge of spring. The floor stopped being damp. The walls stopped exhaling cold. A crack in the northeast corner sealed itself, and the closing of it arrived the way a tooth stops aching, suddenly, with the surprise of relief.
Schematic applied. Warm room. 32 mana. Pool. 12 of 50.
12 mana. Still breathing. But 12 felt like the last coins in a purse I'd been careful with too long. I could hold still, burn nothing, watch the fox sleep, and have 12 mana when something worse came down the stairs. I had been careful before, barred the doors, kept the lanterns trimmed, done everything right, and the waystation had burned anyway while I stood. The memory tried to surface and I pressed it down, the same way I had on the stairs. It went. Mostly. The denizen schematic sat lower in the queue. I read it twice. A denizen's nature, it said, mirrors the core's intent at summoning. A core built on threat breeds predators. A core built on territory breeds guardians. The third category trailed off into a term the system seemed uncertain how to name. 8 mana to create. 1 mana a day, perpetual, for as long as it breathed. The arithmetic was brutal, and I ran it twice, and I spent the 8 mana before I could finish running it a third time. The thing that emerged from the corner nearest the warmth was small, low, rounded, the size of a large cat, covered in something between moss and the short growth that appears on north-facing stone in wet years. Soft, green-dark, patient. No eyes the way a fox has eyes. But it oriented toward me, and I knew it the way you know a room has changed before you can name what changed in it. It sat there, breathed. Whatever I had poured into making it settled into the shape of it, and the thing blinked with what I can only call attention, and the echo of that arrived somewhere below where my ribs used to be.
Oh,
It said, soft, like a door opening. Then it turned toward the fox, and in one motion it was moving, not crossing so much as flowing, faster than its shape suggested, and for a moment, I had no idea what I'd made. The fox startled, legs bunching, one ear flat, a short sound, high and strained. The mossling stopped, waited. The warmth in the walls did what warmth does. The fox's ear uncreased, its legs settled, its eyes went half shut. The mossling lowered itself against the fox's back, slow, and pressed there. Low in whatever served it for a chest, it made a sound like pine boughs in slow wind, a settling sound that had no right to exist in stone. 4 mana left, 1 bleeding out each day. I had burned almost everything I had, and what I'd built wanted to be near a hurt thing. I could not tell if that was wisdom, or if I had only made myself smaller and given the result legs.
what do I call it?
The mossling said, still not looking up from the fox. No answer from me, no voice for it. The part of me that could speak was upstairs with the wreckage.
The small one.
It said.
No name on it.
It was right. I hadn't given the fox a name. It was the fox in the corner, same as I was the core in the dark.
I am Pemmel.
It decided.
Because someone should be.
Pemmel pressed itself tighter against the fox and said nothing else. The fox's breathing had changed. The shallow hitching I'd measured through the long night was gone. Each breath came longer now, slower. The mossling's warmth and the cellar's warmth met somewhere in the straw and held. Then the system chimed. Not the flat ping of a warning or a cost, but something thinner. A clerk consulting a ledger they hadn't expected to open.
Gain. +2 mana. Source. Unclassified.
The word sat where a category should have been. Unclassified. Like a note filed under a column no one had thought to make room for. The pool moved to 6 out of 50, and the system offered nothing else. No explanation. No precedent. Only that word where a label should have been. 6 mana. 3 days of upkeep, then 4. The stairs above me still dark, still empty. Whatever had just happened had no name in the ledger, and the ledger was the only record I had. I read the entry a third time and found no explanation. The cellar settled around me, warm stone, slow breath, the sound of pine boughs in wind from a thing made of moss and intent. I stayed with the number I couldn't account for, turning it over and over in the place where my hands used to be. Chapter 3. Hearth Mana. The unclassified entry didn't stay unclassified. 6 mana in the pool, the warmth holding steady in the stone, Pemmel's breathing slow and even from the corner. Before dawn, the system quietly revised its own ledger.
Hearth Mana. +2. Fox. Juvenile. Safe rest. Night 1.
2 mana. The gain had a name now, and the name told me everything. Something had rested safe inside me, and the resting itself was the yield. I read it twice, 3 times. The fox was still asleep in the corner, its side rising and falling in the small, regular way of something that has stopped expecting the worst. Pemmel had pressed against its flank in the night and hadn't moved. 2 mana for the whole long darkness of a mountain winter, spent without fear. 2. A wolf would have given me 15, 20, maybe, if it had come in hungry. The fox would have yielded something on the smaller end, 5, 6, if I had let the spike trap take it when it staggered down my stairs. Instead, it had slept. I had 2. The arithmetic wasn't complicated. Pemmel cost 1 mana a day to keep present in the world. The fox would leave eventually. Healed animals didn't stay in dark cellars, and when it did, the hearth mana would stop. 6 mana in the pool, 1 going out each day, 2 coming in every night. The fox kept breathing. A net of 1 per day, assuming nothing changed, assuming the fox didn't sicken or startle and bolt, assuming I didn't need to spend anything to hold the warmth in the stone. 1 mana a day. At that rate, I might reach 30 in a month. 25, more likely. The fox wasn't going to stay a month. It was already moving its paws in its sleep, working out whether it was strong enough to leave. When it left, I'd be back to -1 a day, watching my pool drain toward whatever happened to a core that went empty. I could stop, let Pemmel go, let the fox go, wait in the cold for something small and killable to wander down my stairs. The system would note, as it had already noted, that a core generating no threat yield was a core pointed at its own end. And this time, there'd be no half-explained mystery to interrupt the conclusion. Quick death or slow one? I chose slow. Kept the ledger the way I always had behind the bar. Not the numbers I wanted, but the ones I had. The clean arithmetic, the kind that ended in an empty room and called it practical, would have cost me something the pool didn't have a column for. The system noted my choice the way it noted everything, without comment, without approval. It added 1 line.
Anomaly logged. Hearth type core. Classification pending.
The entry sat the way an unresolved debt sits, not filed, not dismissed. Parked in a column the system clearly found inconvenient, as if it had named me wrong and was reconsidering, or waiting for someone further up in whatever bureaucracy governed these things to tell it where to put me. Let it pend. The fox left on the morning of the 3rd day. At the edge of my influence, her warmth signal went quiet. The corner retained the shape of her for a while. The straw pressed flat, the smell of her, the absence that is its own kind of presence. Then that faded too. The hearth mana stopped. My pool sat at 8. 1 going out each day, nothing coming in. 8 days before Pemmel's upkeep drained me to 0. Pemmel came to settle against my core stone. Warmest point in the cellar, farthest from the stairs. It didn't look toward the empty corner. Didn't look at anything in particular.
She'll come back,
it said, chin already resting on its forelegs, eyes already half closed. Said it once, flat, done. The straw in the corner still held the pressed flat shape of her. Healed animals went back to the wild. That was how the mountain worked. Sky, prey, the smell of others of her kind. The math on that was not the kind that changed if you waited long enough. 8 days wasn't enough time for anything to change except my pool. Hearth. The word stayed where I couldn't put it down. Not yield, not harvest. Hearth. The thing at the center of a home that everything else gets built around. 2 mana a night for 1 frightened fox. 2 guests would give 4. 3. 6. A trickle was still a trickle, but trickles added. The waystation above me was a ruin. The cellar was warm. The pass outside was one of the deadliest stretches of road in the mountains in winter. I knew because I had kept an inn on it for 11 years. I knew what travelers needed when the cold came in off the peaks. They needed what I had. Nothing to spend. I held the warmth in the stone as steadily as I could and let the wind work at the ruined boards above. And I let the calculation run. One warm place on a killing pass. How many people climbed through this gap each week? What they'd give willingly. Just by resting. Just by sleeping without fear. To the dark that didn't bite. The boundary marker at the top of the pass still carried the scratched name. Wren's Hollow. Worn, but legible. The kind of name a road keeps long after the building is gone. On the 4th day after the fox left, 4 days into my 8, they came. Bootsteps on the stairs above. Not an animal's soft tread. Not the quick scramble of something frightened. 2-footed, heavy and uneven. One step landing harder than the other. The gait of someone walking on will alone. Dragging. A coat or a pack scraping stone as the weight leaned into the wall for balance. Human. Half frozen, by the way the step kept losing its own rhythm. The warmth in my stones was 8 days, and a decision old. The coat scraped stone once more, and I let the warmth run out to meet it. Chapter 4. The Tribute, Notice. The step gave out on the last turn of the stair. The step was fine. The person on it had given out. That half-second where body and will stopped agreeing, and will lost. She sat down hard on the 4th from the bottom, pack sliding off one shoulder, and the sound she made was not quite a sound at all. A long exhale through a closed throat, the release of something held longer than it should have been. I kept the fire where it was. She was young, or looked it. Maybe 20, maybe less. Though cold does to a face what years haven't gotten around to yet. One boot had a makeshift binding around the ankle, wrapped in what had started as a scarf, and was now just wet cloth. 2 of the fingers she braced against the step showed the waxy, dark-edged pallor of frostbite. She had been moving a long time before she let herself stop.
Hello?
The word aimed at the room rather than anyone in it. Then quieter, like she wasn't sure she wanted an answer.
Is this the place? The place they said was warm?
I had no voice. I had warmth, and Pemmel, and a room built for exactly this. The heat pressed inward from the south wall, and across the cellar Pemmel lifted its mossy head and regarded her with the patient attention of a creature that had never learned to be afraid of people. She stared at it.
All right,
She said. Not acceptance, not quite its opposite. She pushed herself upright and limped toward the fire. Her name came an hour later, when she'd stopped shivering enough to give away a syllable. Talia. Said like it cost something to hand over. She ate from her own pack, dried meat and biscuit gone hard with cold, without asking me for anything. Either she knew better than to trust a dungeon's offerings, or she hadn't decided yet whether I was one. When the food was gone, she sat with her back against the warm stone and her eyes on the fire, but she was never fully in the room. Every few minutes, she looked at the stairs. She wasn't watching out of longing. This was no one watching for a friend. She'd glance up, hold for a count I couldn't see, then look away. The specific, careful vigilance of a person who has learned to track a door without appearing to. She wasn't watching for someone coming to her. She was watching for someone coming after her, from below. Whatever it was, it lived downhill. She never named it. When Pemmel moved to settle beside her, she startled, caught herself immediately, and for one unguarded second, her face showed the look of someone afraid, so long they've forgotten what not afraid looks like. I turned my attention to the wall and gave her the privacy a stone room can manage. There was a difference between outrunning something and having left it behind. Ground runs out. She slept near midnight, curled on her side, injured hand tucked to her chest, Pemmel pressed warm against her back. Her breathing took a long time to slow, the short upper chest catch of someone braced against noise. Then it deepened, and eventually that catch gave way to the long, open pull of someone who had stopped listening for the door.
Hearth Mana. +2. Guest at rest. Talia.
The number was exactly as small as every hearth gain before it. It didn't feel small. The fox had given me mana for its rest. A human life gave more. Heavier presence in my walls, or a wound that ran deeper, or perhaps the system had some measure for the specific quality of a fear this large going quiet. My pool ticked upward through the dark hours, each small gain arriving like a held breath finally released. It brought me to 6 by the time the notification came. This was nothing like the soft accumulation of Hearth Mana. It landed cold and exact.
Assize Tribute Notice. Registry of Dungeon Cores. Cycle 1 of Record. Core. Wren's Hollow. Class. Anomaly. Hearth Type. Classification Pending. Tribute Owed. 100 Mana. Remittance Deadline. 30 days from receipt. Non-remittance. Delinquency Flag. Tribute Night dispatched for assessment and culling. Note: anomaly classification does not constitute exemption from standard tribute obligations.
I read the last line twice. It had the patience of something that does not need to repeat itself. 100 mana, 30 days. I had 6. Talia's rest was giving me 2 mana a night. Pemmel's upkeep cost 1 a day. Net, 1. On a very good night, 3 or 4 guests sleeping without fear loose in the walls, and warmth fully trusted, I might pull 6 Hearth Mana, maybe 7. Against daily drain, a net of 5 or 6 clear. I had never had more than 1 guest at once. I had, at this moment, 1 woman who slept with her back against a wall and her injured hand tucked to her chest. Even if I found that number of guests, even if the pool cycled full and full again, everything I'd generated so far would fit inside 1 fox's rest and 2 nights of a frightened woman's sleep. 100 mana, in 30 days, named the distance between what I currently was and what I would need to become. The notice sat in whatever served me for awareness, with the particular patience of official things that have already calculated the outcome. A tribute night, assessment and culling. The second word was the load-bearing one. 30 days, 5 already gone. No arrangement of it came out better. Across the cellar, Talia's breathing stayed deep and even. Pemmel had not moved. The fire held. Somewhere downhill, whatever she'd been watching for was still there, still hers to carry, still waiting for ground to run out, exactly as it had been when she descended these stairs, and would still be when she climbed back up. The notice didn't move either. It just waited. Talia shifted in her sleep.
Still there?
She murmured, to herself, the echo of something she'd been telling herself long before she found my stairs. I kept the fire even. I let her sleep, and I started counting how many people it would actually take to fill a room. Chapter 5. Word of a Warm Place. The arithmetic was simple enough to do in the dark. 25 days, 100 mana owed, 6 in my pool, and those 6 were Talia sleeping, which meant a gain of 2 the following morning, and 2 the morning after. Run every day perfectly, let Talia never wake frightened, and I'd sit somewhere near 60 mana at the end of it. Somewhere near. The smallest words in the ledger. The 100 mana wasn't a pool balance. It was a cumulative remittance. Every Hearth Mana I generated, the system logged toward the debt. My pool was the bucket. The tribute tally was where it drained. I kept the hearth warm. I let her sleep. Pemmel had taken to perching near her feet, not quite touching, close enough to matter, far enough not to startle. By the second day, Talia had stopped flinching when she woke to find it there.
You're not a monster,
She said on the morning of the 3rd day. She'd been awake a while before she said it. She was looking at Pemmel, not at the ceiling, not at the stairs, just at Pemmel. Pemmel tilted its head.
I don't think so.
It said,
Though I haven't been anything else to compare.
The frostbite had retreated to 2 fingers on her left hand. The ankle was still wrapped, but she'd started moving. Careful laps of the warm room. A rest. Another lap. And each circuit she lingered a few seconds longer at the foot of the stairs. She hadn't climbed yet. She stood looking up at the gray light filtering down. On the fourth morning she came back from those stairs with a stranger behind her. A man, heavyset, pack frame creaking under weight I registered as a slight pressure against my floor. He stopped at the bottom step and stood a moment with his hands still on his pack straps, taking in the low ceiling, the lit hearth, Pemmel against the far wall.
Told you,
She said, to no one in particular. He ate from his own pack and said very little. When he left, he pressed a copper coin into Talia's hand, which she had no way to keep on my behalf. After an awkward pause, she set it on the floor near the hearth, as if I had a mantle for it. That night the gain was 3, not the 2 a stranger's first sleep would have given. Something in his return visit had been counted differently. I traced it back through what I'd noticed. The man had paused at the top of my stairs 2 days before, on his way up the pass, and turned back without descending. He'd never sheltered then. The second visit, where he actually stayed, had been logged differently. 1 mana more, quiet, in a column I had no name for yet. The system had apparently logged a decision I hadn't witnessed. The system was tracking something I was only beginning to read. More came. A shepherd and his brother, moving a small flock ahead of the weather. A merchant woman, with a broken bootlace who stayed only long enough to fix it and warm her hands. 3 pilgrims who spoke in a language I mostly didn't know, but who ate and slept and left without bleeding. Talia was the reason. She sat at the foot of the stairs with her wrapped ankle extended and talked to anyone passing the way I never quite had. Not the careful professional warmth I'd spent a career producing, but something easier and less rehearsed. She told them the truth and let them decide. When the shepherd brothers reached the top of the stairs and slowed, she called up.
Only warm place between here and the valley. There's a creature in it that won't hurt you. I've got the ankle to prove I was scared of it first.
The heavier one, Oswin, looked down into the dark. What kind of creature?
Something I've never seen before.
She said.
Come down and look.
They came down. Oswin kept an eye on Pemmel the entire first evening. The second night, his brother had bad dreams, and Pemmel sat beside him until they quieted, a solid weight at the edge of the bedroll, making no sound. In the morning the man lay still a moment before rising, looking at Pemmel. Then he reached over and touched the back of Pemmel's head with 2 fingers. Briefly, not quite a pat, and went to eat. That night the gain was 7.
Hearth Mana, +7. 4 lives sheltered, 3 returning, loyalty compounds.
I caught it cleanly. The brothers' second night had yielded more than their first. Measurably more, without a clean formula for it. The loyalty accumulated differently, interest building on what had already been given. The system had always known this. I was learning which column it lived in, and what that column might be worth if I could keep filling it. On the morning of the 8th day, my pool sat past 20.
Core, level 2. Mana cap, 75. Schematic unlocked. Hearthside alcove, 18 mana.
Level 2 arrived between the pilgrim's departure and the sound of wind picking up outside. The expanded cap mattered. I could hold more now, bank the gains rather than press against a ceiling. The alcove schematic was simple enough. A recessed nook, stone-warmed, just wide enough for a bedroll and a pack. Room for another body. Another night of warmth. Another voice at the top of the stairs. 22 days remaining. At 7 mana a night, the best I'd managed under good conditions, I might reach something near enough to matter. But 7 a night required guests who'd already been here before, because loyalty compounding was the only math that actually moved. And the only reason the last 3 days had been exceptional was Talia talking to strangers. Pemmel came to rest beside my core, a small familiar weight settling near the warmth.
The pilgrims are gone.
It said.
The brothers leave tomorrow. I know.
A moment passed.
We need more people to know about the stairs.
It said.
More than past talk reaches. I know that too.
There was only one answer. I'd been sitting beside it for 2 days. Talia found the hearth that evening, the closest she could come to finding me directly. She'd climbed the stairs twice and come back down twice. The third time, she sat close to the warm stone and pressed her palms flat against it.
I'm going to go back down the mountain.
She said. The stone held its heat under her palms.
Not because I want to.
She looked at her hands against the stone.
There's a settlement in the Split Valley, 3 hours below. 40 people, maybe more. They've been crossing this pass for half a year, since the lower road went under.
40. On foot. In winter. Through this pass.
I can tell them about this place.
A pause.
I know people there.
Pemmel, from across the room.
You don't have to.
No,
Talia said.
I don't.
She held her palms against the warm stone.
But she...
And she stopped, and didn't finish it, and that half-sentence sat in the warmth between us like something set down carefully, and not yet picked back up. She stood, tested the ankle. It held.
3 days.
She said.
Maybe 4.
She looked at Pemmel.
Watch the hearth?
Always.
Pemmel said. She shouldered her pack, climbed the stairs without looking back. At the top, for just a moment, her shadow cut across the gray afternoon light. Then it was gone. 22 days, 100 mana. A settlement of 40 people who didn't know my stairs existed, and one woman walking back toward whatever had driven her up here in the first place. I held the fire and waited. Chapter 6. The Man Who Came to Rest. The cellar was quieter after Talia left. Pemmel settled into its corner beside the hearth, and the warmth held without her presence to disturb it. 22 days remaining. 22 in my pool, and a rate that would reach 40 before the deadline if nothing changed. 40 below a ceiling of 100, the way a road marker sits below the mountain it names. The word moved faster than I expected. By the second morning, a shepherd came down my stairs. No pack, just a man cutting the pass at dusk because he'd heard there was a warm cellar that didn't demand anything dangerous for the warmth. He stayed 6 hours. By the 4th day, I'd seen 4 guests, including 2 road merchants who arrived from opposite ends of the pass and passed each other at my threshold with the guarded nod of people who work the same road. All of them had heard the same thing. A woman, most said, coming down the mountain, told them about a place that kept the cold out and asked nothing in return. Each arrival added to the tally. Pemmel showed the merchants where the straw was cleanest, and the numbers climbed the way they always had. Gradual, real, not enough. On the 12th day of the assize cycle, I held 34 mana toward the 100 I owed, 66 short, 18 days remaining. Then the old man came down my stairs. He did not move like someone crossing a dangerous pass. He moved like someone who had already made the crossing that mattered, and was handling the last few steps as a courtesy to a body that had served him well. One hand trailed the cellar wall, not gripping, just touching, as a man touches a familiar staircase in the dark. He carried a cloth bag over one shoulder that breathed time and something astringent whenever he shifted his weight. His pack, the real one, was too small for a journey. I had kept a waystation for 15 years, and I knew what people carried when they were traveling toward something, and what they carried when they were not. Pemmel watched him from the near wall. Did not approach. Just watched, with the quality of stillness it used when something required more than its usual kind of tending. The old man reached the floor and stood for a moment, looking at the hearth the way a person looks at a place they have been picturing. Wren's Hollow, he said. He spoke the name the way a man speaks a destination aloud when he has finally arrived. He sat down beside the fire, carefully, the careful of joints that hold opinions about sudden movement. He held his hands out to the heat, and Pemmel crossed the floor without any particular hurry and settled against his shin. He looked down at Pemmel with the soft, unguarded attention of someone who'd stopped pretending not to need comfort. Not surprise, just a man being looked after, and old enough to let it be. She said you were kind, he said. The woman on the pass, coming down. She said that specifically, that your dark was kind. He turned his hands, warming the backs. I have been a woundsman for 40 years. I have been at a great many deaths, and I know what a good one looks like, and I know what it means to waste the one you have. The fire held its shape, and the shape of the room shifted in a way I had no word for, the way it shifts when the last guest has arrived, and you understand the night is full. Every person I had sheltered in 15 years of waystaying had arrived heading somewhere, even when the somewhere was only not here. This man was already where he was going. He was the destination. He looked up at the light I kept in the stone above the hearth. "My name is Aldrich," he said. "I am asking to stay." I made the fire burn warmer. It was the only honest answer I had. He closed his eyes. "Thank you," he said, and the simplicity of it dropped into me, like a key into a lock I hadn't known was there. He ate a little. He slept. He woke at dusk and spoke into the room, as if the conversation had been running all along. He told me about a woman named Sarah, about a stand of medicinal birch he had tended for 20 years that he was leaving to go however it wanted now, about an apprentice who was ready and didn't know it yet and would figure it out on his own. The ordinary things a person hands off when they will not be needing them anymore. A merchant came through the late afternoon, stayed 3 hours, left 2 mana in my tally, and a set of muddy boot prints. Aldrich rested through it without stirring. I kept the heat exactly right. Not hot enough to be uncomfortable, not soft enough to let the cold back in at the edges. The warmth that says you are safe here, you can put the rest of it down. I had learned that calibration through 11 winters of keeping a waystation, and I held it now by attention, by the particular kind of care that is not love exactly, but is as close as a building can get. Aldrich's chest did not rise. The cellar went on exactly as it was. The fire, the straw, his open palms on his knees, the stillness where his breathing had been settled into the room like a new fact. Pemmel's head came up. The fire did not change. Aldrich had gone between one breath and the next, as quietly as a lamp running out of oil.
Bequest, Aldrich, woundsman. Given willingly and at peace. Mana received, 47.
47 mana. More than any single night of hearth income, and it arrived with a different texture. Whole, unhurried. The way a coin left on the table is different from a coin taken from a pocket. I knew that from the way it landed. And then Aldrich was through me and gone, whatever he had been under 40 years of carrying the dying back toward themselves. I held the tribute tally at arm's length for a long time. When I finally looked, 81. 19 to the 100. 18 days still on the calendar. I could reach it. That was a true thing. I held it and did not trust myself with it yet. Pemmel did not move from his side until morning light came down the stairs. When it did, Pemmel looked up slowly, and for a moment neither of us did anything.
He had been ready before he found the stairs.
It said. A long pause, then quieter.
I wanted you to know.
The warmth, the care, the vigil at his side. All of it real. I did not doubt that. What had passed between me and Aldrich in those hours was true, the same way it had been true with every cold-handed stranger who had come down those stairs and left steadier. I had built this place, held the fire, kept the calibration right, and he had arrived at what he was looking for, and died here at peace. And I held 81 mana. I had sat with dying guests before, when I was still flesh. I had never confused comfort for trade, never laid a coal fire and thought, this is an exchange. I didn't think I was confusing it now, but the system had a word for what Aldrich had left behind. Bequest. Filed, labeled, added to a ledger I had not asked to keep. The difference between what I had done and what I had gained still felt real. It just felt less simple than I had expected it to. I let it sit, unresolved, beside the warmth that was also real. By midday, the cellar held 7 guests, more than it had ever held at once. Word had stopped trickling and started moving in both directions. People were arriving in pairs, which meant Talia's message had spread sideways through the lower valley, neighbor to neighbor, rather than one woman telling a road merchant. Pemmel moved among them, pausing here, adjusting straw there, settling where it was most needed, with an ease that belonged to weeks of quiet practice. The Hearth Mana came in steady and soft. Each rest, each safe sleep, each meal eaten without fear. A shepherd was back for the second time, his loyalty yielding more than any first-timer, and the count kept rising the way it always had. 2 here, 3 there, accruing in the patient way of things that compound. The trapper came last. He paused at the top of my stairs. The hesitation was in his weight before it was in his feet. Then he committed to coming down. "Something's unsettled on the eastern ridge," he said, to no one in particular. "Heard it all the way from the valley. Pass above the tree line is shaking loose," someone said. "Like a tide coming." He shrugged it off and came in and found a wall to put his back against and shut his eyes. His words sat alongside the tribute tally and the memory of 47 mana arriving whole and unhurried, alongside everything else I was learning to carry. The eastern ridge was outside my influence, outside anything I could reach or read or shape. But in the weeks since I first woke in this cellar, the things outside my influence had developed a habit of coming down my stairs. Chapter 7. Barred Doors. The man with the tired eyes was asleep inside an hour of arriving, and his words settled into the cellar the way ash settles after a fire goes out. Drifting down slow, coating everything. Beast tide, eastern ridge. I'd never seen a tide from the inside. My old body, the one I'd worn for 30 years, had lived and died here without understanding what moved under the mountain's skin. Now the mountain was my skin, every crack in my foundation, and every inch of stone above my stairs. But I was still blind past my own influence, still unable to reach the eastern ridge any more than I could reach the night of the fire. The bedrock spoke first, hours before the sound. The crystal that was myself caught it through wet stone, a pressure moving not fast but undeviating, the way water finds its level. Pemmel raised its head from where it curled beside a sleeping shepherd's apprentice and went still.
Influence boundary. Contacts at threshold. Eastern approach.
Then the sound arrived. A mass sound, a tide sound, deep enough to feel in the mortar between every stone. My guests came awake with the quick animal alertness of people who'd spent years on a killing pass. The nearest man was upright in one motion. Across the room, a woman had pulled something from her bedding and held it pressed flat against her side. No one moved toward the stairs. No one spoke. I didn't decide. That is the truth I've had to carry since. My influence reached for every doorframe in the cellar, and I pressed them shut, gap by gap, latch by latch, until the dark outside was on one side and my people were on the other. Stone against wood against stone. Done. The memory came with the motion, unbidden. A door, firelight through the keyhole, shouting from outside that I'd told myself was the wind. I pushed it back. The tide was here. The creatures, whatever they were, predators broken loose from something worse upstream, ran the pass above my roof like a river through a crack, and the sound of them moved through my walls like a second heartbeat. My guests pressed into the center of the warm room. Pemmel moved between them, settling at each person's side, small enough to pass without disturbing, staying until the worst of the breathing slowed. Where Pemmel went, the fear eased. Not enough.
Hearth Mana. 0. Guests distressed. Threshold not met.
All those careful gains, every loyal return, every long night of breathing bodies and banked fire, sat still in my pool, generating nothing. Fear had a weight, and it zeroed the arithmetic of welcome. I held the doors and counted what I was losing. The tide ran 2 hours and some. Then it thinned, went to ordinary mountain dark and cold wind, and the pass came back to itself. I opened the doors. The man in the north corner was already on his feet. Cale had come up from the higher shepherd camps 3 days ago, rested one night, gone back down at mid-morning, and returned by evening with a different set around his eyes. His brother had a fever. Bad, 4 days running. He'd come back to sleep in the hollow, and leave before first light for the valley. He was through the door before the latch had finished moving. He stopped 4 steps up the stairs, in the moonlight falling through the gap at the top, and turned back. One fist pressed flat against the wall. Something in him was working very hard not to become worse than angry.
The pass is clear.
I said, through the stone.
The tide is gone.
How long? He said. Not a question.
2 hours and…
2 hours. Quiet, the way a breaking thing is quiet before the break. My brother's been running fever for 4 days, and I've been trying to reach him since before the tide hit, and you barred the door. The word went through my stone and stayed there. I had barred the door.
The pass was…
I know what the pass was. The quietness cracked, just at the edges. I've been crossing it for 10 years. I know what I walk into. That's mine to decide. He looked at his hands, then at the warm room around him, the fire, the sleeping guests, Pemmel still moving between pallets. You kept me safe. I understand that. But you don't get to decide what I can survive. He went up the stairs. The door at the top settled closed behind him. The other guests resettled. No one said anything. The fire kept burning. My mana pool held the number it had held before the tide, unchanged, unmoved, and the tally that had felt close this morning was no closer now. The memory came back with the quiet. More of it this time, not a fragment but a shape. My inn, the timber frame waystation I'd run for 20 years before the fire took it. A winter night, something outside that I'd decided was too dangerous to meet. I had barred every door, told everyone to stay down, stay in, stay quiet. I was keeping them safe. The fire had not cared what I was keeping them from. I still couldn't hold the full shape of it. The memory went dark where the important parts should have been. But the barred doors were always sharp. Pemmel settled against my core stone and said,
He'll be all right. He knows the pass. He might be too late. He might.
Pemmel didn't flinch from it.
But he chose to go.
I let that sit. After a while, long enough for the fire to drop a notch and 3 of the remaining guests to find the deep rhythm of sleep, Pemmel said,
The shepherd, the one who just left. When the sound started, he stood up. His hands were on his pack, not to run.
Pemmel turned its head toward the stairs.
You sealed the door before he took a step. I went to the threshold to help hold it.
A pause.
I couldn't get it open either.
Pemmel named what had happened. That was all.
You let them sleep inside you. 4 nights for some of them. Long enough to know your walls.
The small creature went still.
Why won't you let them stand in them?
The question sat in the dark between us. I held it instead of answering it. Chapter 8. Assessor at the Gate. 3 days I held Pemmel's question without answering it. The knowing was always there. A coal in my chest with no right to still be warm. The guests came and went in the ordinary way. By the 3rd morning after the beast tide, my tribute tally had crept to 87. 3 nights of cautious sleeping, loyalty compounding on the ones who had been before. Nothing dramatic. 13 mana short with 12 days remaining on the assize clock, and an arithmetic I'd been carefully not thinking about, while I kept the fire, and Pemmel kept watch at the threshold. Then the measured tread came down my stairs. Most of my guests arrived in some shape of wrong, frostbitten, frightened, out of road and out of choices. This one came down the way a man walks into a room he already owns, without rush or caution. The lantern he carried was standard registry issue, wick trimmed to a precise height. The surcoat beneath his traveling cloak was gray. I knew that gray. Every core registered with the assize knew that gray. He was older than the title tended to be. 40s, the kind of age that comes with edges worn smooth by long use. A scar ran from his jaw to the corner of his left ear, old and silvered over, a professional's souvenir. His hands, when he set the lantern on my floor and looked around the cellar, carried the particular stillness of someone who had learned not to grip things tight. His registry pin caught the firelight. Below it, The clasp of his cloak bore the assize scales. He stood in the center of my warm room and turned once, slowly. His attention moved across the space the way a hand moves across a map. The fire, the alcoves, the two sleeping guests bundled near the wall. No traps, no kill floor, no seated nests. He made a small sound that wasn't surprise. He had read my file.
Wren's Hollow,
He said.
I am Karen, Tribute Knight, 3rd Circuit.
He set the words down the way you set a key on a counter, not announcing, just placing.
I've come early.
The last 2 words were the whole message. He didn't sit. He stood with his hands loose at his sides and walked me through the arithmetic, as if perhaps I hadn't worked it myself. 87, mana toward 100. 12 days left. He produced a ledger and held it toward the firelight. My own name at the top of a column, and beside it, stamped in red ink, Anomaly, Hearth type, classification pending.
A genuine curiosity.
He said.
First of its kind in the 3rd Circuit that I've found, possibly in the full registry.
He closed the ledger with the care of a man who respects his tools.
Curiosity doesn't pay tribute.
What he offered was this. He would seed a small nest in one of my outer rooms. Something controlled, something he would manage personally. A pair of fang-crawl juveniles, the yield modest but reliable, 12 to 15 mana a cycle. He would administer the kills, log them to my tribute account, and be gone before my current guests stirred. I would reach my 100. I would register as compliant. He would note in his report that the Anomaly Core had shown cooperation, which would benefit my next review.
You keep your hearth.
He said.
You keep your guests. 1 room I manage, and the numbers close.
He said it without warmth, without cold, the way a surgeon names an incision.
I've seen a dozen cores try to survive on what you're running. This is the kindest resolution available.
I held the numbers in the silence between us. He wasn't wrong. Then his pack moved. He had set it against the base of my hearth when he came in, and I'd read the canvas bulk as supplies. The canvas shook and a sound tore out of it, high and frantic, nothing like the steady, frightened breathing of any creature who had come through my door. Whatever was inside was past afraid, past the edge where fear still has a shape, just falling. Karen reached into the pack and lifted out a small iron cage. The creature inside was roughly the size of a large cat, dark-furred and matted, claws shredding at the bars in continuous spasms. Its ears were flat to its skull. Its eyes had gone fully white. The panic off it hit me the way a draft hits in the stairwell. Everywhere at once, nothing to block it with.
This is your first,
Karen said.
A fang-crawl juvenile. Threat Category 2. Yield is small, but it establishes the account and demonstrates intent.
He set the cage on my hearthstones and glanced at the corner where Pemmel had gone very still.
You don't have to watch. You only have to authorize it.
The thing in the cage screamed on my hearth. I had run a waystation for 11 years. I had housed soldiers the night before battles, merchants carrying things they didn't name, a widow who couldn't stop shaking for 3 days. I knew the shape of a man who believed what he was doing. Karen believed. The ledger, the cage, the clean column of numbers. He believed the way I had once believed, that a barred door was the same thing as protection. That was the part I couldn't put down. He wasn't lying. The arithmetic was real. The offer was real. And the creature screaming on my hearthstone was just the first entry in a column that would keep me alive. He had done this many times before. The scar, the hands that didn't grip tight. A man who'd been doing necessary things long enough that they had stopped presenting themselves as choices. I wanted the arithmetic to be enough. Talia had been in the upper alcove mending a pack strap when Karen arrived. She'd gone quiet when his voice first carried up, the particular held stillness of someone who has spent time learning which sounds mean run. I hadn't warned her. I didn't know what she would do with the warning. She came down the 3 steps from the alcove with the pack over one shoulder and stopped on the second step when the gray surcoat caught the firelight. The color left her face between one breath and the next. Her pack dropped from her shoulder, and she let it fall, and her good hand, the one without the still healing blisters from the frost, pressed flat against the wall, steadying herself, not reaching, as if something underfoot had shifted. Karen had his back to her. Her jaw locked, her gaze fixed on the back of his head, past it, somewhere the room didn't reach. Still, a candle just before it goes out. Then Karen turned at the sound of the dropped pack, and their eyes met, and something moved in his face. He had seen that look before, the look of someone who has seen him work.
That's surcoat.
Talia's voice came out abraded, like cloth dragged over stone.
Third circuit.
Her gaze dropped to the assize clasp at his throat and came back up.
You were at Milden's Fork.
The cage went on screaming between us. Chapter 9. The Thing in the Cage. The cage kept screaming. Karen didn't move. He stood with his hands at his sides, his face shut, and Talia stood in the doorway of the upper alcove with her bandaged hand at her side, and her jaw set like a bar across a door. He knew the name. The word landed on him. Milden's Fork. The small muscle at the corner of his jaw worked once and went still. A man who had filed the job and moved on. That was all the face gave.
That was 2 cycles ago.
He said.
A village that failed to pay assize on 3 registered cores, 2 of which had gone feral. Standard cull. I don't expect you to find it comfortable.
Talia's hand was shaking, not with cold.
Standard.
She said. Flat, dropped between them and sank.
I'll give you the cage open,
Karen said, and turned back to me, back to the hearthstones, where he'd learned my attention lived.
1 juvenile, tended by my hand, not yours. 12 to 15 mana a cycle, administered humanely. You reach the 100. I file you compliant. You keep your doors, and your fire, and whatever else you've built here.
The juvenile in the cage screamed again, thin and ragged, the sound a creature makes when it has been frightened past the edge of itself and has nothing left but the noise. It had thrown itself against the bars so many times the iron was smeared red. The refusal was already there, the way the floor was there. I had known it before the offer was complete. I knew what this kind of certainty was worth. I had held iron logic in my hands on the night my inn burned. Held it so tightly I could still feel the shape of it.
Assize tribute. 87 of 100 mana. 11 days remaining. Status. Assessment period active.
Karen bent and lifted the cage and set it down again in the corner by the cold wall, away from the fire. He left it there.
Think on it,
he said.
The creature isn't suffering for want of warmth.
He left, his boots on my stairs, measured and even. No hurry. Talia came down 10 minutes after the last sound of him faded. She sat on the floor beside my hearth, knees drawn up, not looking at the cage. Pemmel padded to her side, and she let him, which was something.
He'll come back,
Pemmel said.
Yes. Wren.
He turned toward the air above the hearthstone.
Let me begin. The denizens, I know what I am. I know what I came from. I can make the others understand how to stand like that, in the walls, the way stone stands, holding, nothing more.
He had been asking this for days, in one form or another, since the beast tide, since Kale walked out into the dark. The question underneath was always the same. The creature in the cage had gone quiet, spent past the edge of itself. It crouched against the far bars with its haunches shaking, tracking every movement with the white-rimmed attention of something expecting to die and failing at it. I opened the warmth toward it, the channel I opened to a tired traveler. Space. No threat. Rest. Nothing will take you here. The creature's eyes didn't change. It had no category for what I was. Talia said, still looking at the floor.
Milden's Fork had a licensed dungeon, a kill core. The assize said it had gone feral, killing outside its registered parameters, targeting people on the road.
She stopped.
It hadn't. It had started sheltering injured animals that wandered into it. Something in how it ran had shifted. It stopped producing kill yield. So the night came.
Her hands lay flat on her knees.
He culled the dungeon. Then the 3 families whose paperwork was tied to the core, because the core was forfeit. Then, anyone who tried to interfere, because interference in an A-size action is.
She didn't say the word. She didn't need to.
51 people. He had a ledger. He checked off every name.
The fire burned. The cage was still. And then, slowly, the way a locked door gives when the wood has finally swelled past holding, the rest of it came back. All of it. The whole shape. The waystation had been full that night. A merchant's party coming off the pass. 3 drovers from the high farms. 2 women traveling together who had never given their names. 14 people. Maybe 15. I had gone to the window, and the torches were moving wrong, spreading the way search parties spread, and pitch was sharp on the wind. I had barred every door. Before the fire, I had barred them against whatever was coming outside, because I knew, with the certainty of someone who had kept travelers safe for 20 years, that the threat was out there, and my people were in here, and the walls were the difference between them. The drover with the thick build and the voice like a handsaw had said, "Let us out, we can run, some of us can fight." I had said no. I had believed, completely, that I was saving them. The fire came through the roof, not the doors. By the time I understood, there was no door left to open. The bar held. I had built a fine bar, good iron brackets, the sort that could hold against a battering ram. It held through everything. I came back to the cellar with something trembling in the place where hands should be. Pemmel was watching me. He had learned to read the quality of my silences.
Will you tell me no, then?
He said.
About the denizens.
Yes. That was still my answer. If I let them lift a hand, the lifting would become what defined the space. What I was building here was not a fortified position but a hearth, and the difference mattered, had to matter. And if I let the fear in through that door, Karen would be right about what I was becoming. Another dungeon that had shifted its parameters. Another liability checked off a ledger.
Wren.
Pemmel said, and his voice was gentler than I had earned.
The fear is already in.
The caged creature moved. It had been still for almost an hour. It moved fast, the sudden scramble of something that has decided, in some animal calculus, that the moment has arrived. It hit the bars and the cage tipped, and Talia turned toward the sound, and the creature's foreleg came through the gap between bars and raked across her arm before she could pull back. Talia made a sound through her teeth and pressed her other hand hard against the cut. Blood came through her fingers, not deep, but real. She held herself controlled, taking stock. A wound that would need cleaning, binding, watching for the heat that meant trouble.
Hearth Mana suspended, guest in distress.
The creature pressed back into the corner, breathing in shallow lurches. Talia looked up toward the hearthstones, the place she had learned to look when she was speaking to me. Her face was level, and worn, and entirely without surprise.
Bind it,
She said.
Have you got cloth?
My bar had held. Talia was bleeding inside my walls, cut by the thing I had refused to release, and I could feel the mana gone from the hearth the same way I had felt it drain when the beast tide came. The same suspension, the same silence where warmth had been. The drover's voice. Let us out. The bar in my hands, the roof coming in. I had always meant well. Chapter 10. Delinquent. Pemmel found cloth before I thought to look for it, a strip torn from the alcove blanket, and I held the room at the highest warmth I could manage while they worked. Talia pressed her lips together and watched Pemmel bind her forearm with the concentrated attention of someone choosing what not to look at. In the far corner of the cage, the fang-crawl juvenile breathed in fast, shallow pulls, body turned toward the wall.
It'll scar.
Talia said, not looking at the cage.
Doesn't matter.
I had no voice to argue. The Hearth Mana that had been ticking upward through a full house went to 0 the moment her blood hit my hearthstones, and stayed there. 4 days, and I could not get it back. I tried the obvious things. Warmth pressed into every corner. Pemmel settling near the cage bars with its particular stillness, the way it had once sat beside a shivering fox that wasn't sure yet whether the dark was kind. The juvenile watched Pemmel the way exhausted wild things watch anything that doesn't lunge. Flat, unblinking, spending nothing on trust. It didn't strike out again. It didn't settle either. The guests in the upper alcove slept shallower, left earlier, and on the third night the drover finally went deep enough to give me 2 Hearth Mana. That was all the 4 days had to show. 89. 7 days left. 10 mana still to find. Karen came back on the 4th day. He came alone. A man still open to negotiating brought people with him. A man who had already decided didn't need them. He walked my stairs without pausing at the threshold, crossed to the main room, and looked at the cage. The juvenile still there. The room still unseated. The offer still where he had left it 5 days ago, in the space between what I had and what I would not do.
Kept it, then,
he said. His voice had the flat register of a man confirming a number. He turned to face the hearthstones, the place Talia had learned to look when she spoke to me. His expression in the firelight was arithmetic made legible, the kind a man finishes before he opens his mouth.
89 mana, 7 days. You know what that adds to.
I held the room warm and said nothing he could read.
You still have the offer, technically.
He drew something from his surcoat, a flat disk of gray stone, the assize scales carved deep into the face, and pressed it against my outer wall. The contact arrived like the click of a latch on the far side of a door, small, certain, complete.
Assize decree, Wren's Hollow. Status, delinquent. Culling protocol active.
He took the first room an hour after the disk went down. The large room, the one with the wider hearth nook. 8 guests on my best night. My influence drew back from those walls the way warmth leaves stone after the fire dies. Gradually, without any sound to mark when it finished. The walls remained. The stone was still there. The space was no longer mine, and I could no longer feel through it. 2 rooms left. Karen left before midday. The cold weather shelter off the East Passage went in the early afternoon. Narrow, barely enough for 2 travelers and their packs, but shaped from my own mana and my own intent. Another quiet withdrawal. What I held now was what I had started with, the original cellar, the hearthstones, and the alcove upstairs where Talia slept. 8 days to grow the hollow, 1 afternoon to return it to its beginning. Fewer rooms meant fewer guests even when everything else was right. But everything else was not right, because Karen had left something on my stairs before he went. I knew it the way I know cold spots in thin stone, by what was present rather than visible. A quality in the stairwell air, just where my influence first touched the steps. Something that lived just below the edge of thought. A traveler would register it as unease without stopping to name it, obeying before they understood the instruction. That evening a shepherd came down from the pass route, a man who had come to the hollow 3 times before, whose 4th visit would have compounded across every return I'd logged. He reached my threshold. He slowed. He stood with one hand against the doorframe, feeling something he couldn't have named, and then he turned around and went back up into the dark. His lamp moved away until the rock face above swallowed it. 7 days left on the assize clock. 2 rooms still to take. 10 mana still to find. From a refuge that now turned every arriving guest away before they ever reached the warmth. I held those numbers against each other. 7 days was the deadline. The assize recording failure, and the culling concluded. But Karen didn't need 7 days. He needed only as many as it took to sever 2 more rooms, and then he would reach the cellar, where my core sat in the dark. If he came back every 2 days, he had my core before the week was out. A week before the deadline, days still on the clock. Nothing in the culling protocol required him to wait. Chapter 11. Open the doors. The logic arrived the way fear does when it grows large enough to feel like reason. Pull everyone in, narrow the passage, wait. 2 rooms between Karen and my core, 6 days of calendar he had no obligation to use. I drew my influence inward, not into stone, no mana for walls, but into a tightening of the air near the cellar arch, the way I had once drawn every bolt in an inn against a November night and named it safety. Pemmel lifted its head. I kept narrowing.
Culling protocol active. Influence, 2 chambers. Tribute, 90 of 100. Days remaining, 6.
The panel dissolved. The numbers didn't stop me.
What are you doing?
Talia was on her feet, arm wrapped in strips of wool torn from a travel blanket. The beast had given her that wound. I hadn't prevented it. She was looking at the narrowed arch the way she looked at things she had already decided to fight. I had no voice. I sent Pemmel. It crossed to her and pressed one small mossy hand against her uninjured arm.
Wren is afraid.
It said.
I know she is.
Talia didn't look at Pemmel. She looked at the arch.
She's about to bar the doors again.
I kept narrowing. The beast stirred in the corner by Aldrich's empty cot, his shape still readable in the dent the blanket held, the way wool keeps the memory of weight. The beast had been calmer since I freed it from the cage. Not tame, nothing like tame, but it no longer threw itself at walls or showed the whites of its eyes at every sound. It watched Talia now with a long, level look.
Don't.
She was talking to the hearthstones, talking to me.
Don't seal us in.
3 more guests were in the alcove above. A tinker, who had been here twice before. A woman walking north. A young man with a broken pack frame, who needed 2 more days to mend it. Frightened of Karen's gray surcoat. Still here. If I sealed the passage, they would be safe.
I've been in a sealed room before.
Her voice went flat and specific, the way it did when she stopped speaking around the thing and started speaking at it.
I know what it feels like from inside. You know how it ends.
The tinker came down from the alcove, heavyset, beard going gray at the corners, the sort of man who said few things and meant them. He stopped at the foot of the stairs, looked at the narrowed arch, then at the hearthstones. She's trying to close us in. A beat. Won't help. The others had heard. The woman and the pack-frame boy came to the head of the stairs and stood looking down. Neither moved toward the door. The beast stood from Aldrich's cot and walked to the center of the room and sat. One long breath out through its nose. Slow, nothing like the screaming it had made in the cage. And it stayed. Pemmel hadn't moved, made from my own intent, and my intent was welcome, and welcome did not seal. I stopped narrowing. The bar had been cold iron, heavy bracket, a sound so familiar I had stopped hearing it years ago. I had barred every door because the threat was outside, the mob with the torches at the street-side shutters, the shouting from the yard, every bolt, the tap room, the kitchen passage, the side door where the lock had worked loose the previous winter, and I had fitted the better bar, the one that would hold through anything. I had stood in the center of my inn, safe, for about 4 minutes. The fire came through the roof, because a mob with torches doesn't need to break through a door. It needs only to put burning pitch on thatch and let the wind do the rest. Smoke first, then heat. Then light through the ceiling boards going orange and wrong, and by then the bolts were working against us, not for us, and my good iron bar was in its bracket, and my people were on the wrong side of it. 14. Possibly 15. I had never known the exact count. The not knowing had followed me through the dying and into this second life in the dark. My walls had not saved anyone. My locked doors had done the killing. I let the arch open. Not gradually. I stopped narrowing and reversed it. Pushed the passage back to what it had been before Karen came. Before I had started closing again. The air near the archway changed. Still cold at the top where his deterrent sat on my stairs. Still wrong at the threshold, where arriving guests turned back before they knew why. But mine below it, my passage, my walls. Talia let out a breath. The Hearth Mana was still dead. The deterrent was still there. I had no better path to the tribute I owed, and I had opened the doors anyway. The cellar had 2 storage bays I had never shaped into anything. The old waystation's tools had survived in stone when the wood above them burned. Spike mauls, an axe, short-handled mattocks, hinges and staples in a box. I had looked at them every day and offered nothing, because the guests came to rest, and I had believed rest and fighting were 2 separate things. I opened the bay. Pemmel understood without being asked. It crossed to the bay, pulled the door wide, and stood aside. Talia looked at what was inside. The axe, the maul heads, the weight of iron that was not dungeon-made, just old and real and present.
Are you sure?
She said. The fire in the hearthstones brightened.
Okay.
She took the axe, winced when her wounded arm took the weight, shifted it to her good hand.
Then let's talk about what he does when he comes back.
The tinker was already at the maul heads, testing balance. The pack frame boy came down the stairs and stood reading the ceiling joists, the angles, the room's geometry, the way someone does when they want to understand what a structure can take. Bottleneck at the arch, the tinker said. Narrow approach on the stair.
Wren can shape both.
Pemmel said.
She's been holding mana.
I had sat on the 47 mana Aldrich had given me, a single willing breath's worth, and spent nothing. Not anymore. I spent 6 on the passage beside the arch, thickened the stone on one side into a shoulder, a place to stand with the wall at your back. Then 4 more at the base of the stair, a slight angle of rock that would force anyone descending to come through sideways.
Mana, 51 of 75. Shaping active.
The shapes held. 2 new angles in my walls, and for the first time since Karen pressed his disc to the stone, the mana had gone somewhere real.
We need more bodies than this.
Talia said. She was measuring the bottleneck, counting something I couldn't see.
If he brings constructs,
She stopped.
the aura on the stairs is still there. It turns people back before they reach us.
Pemmel said.
Only people who don't know about it.
She set the axe down, thinking.
There are people in the valley who've stayed here before. People who know this place is real, that it won't bite them. If someone told them it was worth pushing through a bad feeling on the stairs, some of them would come.
She looked up at the stairwell, toward the cold at the top, and the open mountain beyond.
I could go.
Down the mountain, back toward what she had climbed here to escape. I pushed warmth through the hearthstones, something older than yes. I had opened the doors. The rest was hers to decide.
How long do we have?
She said. I didn't know. Karen's first visit had been 6 days past. 6 days left on the clock. If the pattern held, he could come back today. Today, possibly. And the valley was a full day's travel each way. No good arithmetic. There had never been good arithmetic in this, from the assize notice onward, and I had chosen it anyway every time. The tinker had a maul in his hands. The pack frame boy was studying the ceiling. The beast sat in the center of the floor, as if it had decided to stay. By midday, the young man with the broken frame had gone, his mending finished.
I go at dawn.
Talia said. She was already past the asking, already in the shape of the plan.
I'll be back before dark.
She looked at the axe in her good hand, and at the arm she couldn't use, and at the stairs going up into Karen's cold.
Don't let him take anything else before I'm back.
She said. Chapter 12. What We Can Spend. Dawn came gray through the stairwell, and Talia went with it. Through the stone I tracked what no body could, her shape climbing toward the deterrent cold. The moment the aura reached her, Karen's seated fear pressing like weight against the chest. And then, deliberately, she walked through it anyway. She'd known it was there. She chose to feel every step regardless.
Hearth Mana, loyalty tier. Repeat guest. X9. Compounded gain logged.
Small. It always was. But it came. The tinker had the maul balanced across his knees before the cold settled back over the stairs. He was looking at the ceiling, at the angle of the support beam I'd shaped 3 nights past, into something that left anyone coming down briefly, badly exposed.
Tell me what you see.
I said. The voice I used was warmth in the stone, something between a sound and a feeling. My guests had gotten used to it, the way you get used to a hearth that pops. The tinker scratched at his jaw. He was a compact man, 50s, with a traveler's flat economy of movement. He'd slept in the east alcove 4 times. He'd given me his name on the 3rd night, which meant he'd decided I was worth naming himself to. 3 steps where anyone coming down is turned halfway around by the corner, he said. 1 place to put a body that can't easily be flanked. Ceiling's too low to swing the maul overhead. That's a problem.
It is.
I agreed.
But it's also Karen's problem.
He turned the maul over in his hands. He said finally. It is. Pemmel had stopped petitioning me. It was teaching now, real teaching, the way it had tended the fox, patient, and without violence in any part of it. My other denizens were gentle by nature. I'd shaped them from welcome, and they'd come out quiet. What Pemmel gave them wasn't fighting. It was the shape of staying, where to brace, how to put a body between a threat and the room behind. The fang-crawl juvenile watched from the hearthstones with flat, sharp eyes. It hadn't chosen a name. I hadn't offered one. It had just stayed, and every morning that was a small declaration I didn't know how to repay. Talia came back before noon, and she didn't come back alone. 4 people pushed through the cold on the stairs in the 2 hours after midday. Karen's deterrent hit each of them the same way, the aura pressing outward, his seated fear pushing against whoever reached that step, and each one stopped 1 step from the threshold. The shepherd's wife, the merchant who'd sprained his ankle on the ice pass and spent 3 nights resting it against my hearthstones, the young woman who'd been too sick to stand, who'd left a piece of embroidery on the wall while she was getting better, Martin, the tinker, who had come back a 4th time. They came through anyway, not because Karen's aura had weakened, but because they knew what waited below it.
Hearth Mana. Loyalty tier. Repeat guests. X4. Compounding applied. Pool. 49 of 75.
The deterrent Karen hung on those stairs was built for strangers, people for whom the cold was just cold, the hollow just another place to lose ground against the mountain. These 4 had felt the warmth. When the fear pushed back, they had something inside themselves to push from. 49 mana. Not enough, not with anything morning could give me. But it was theirs, and they'd spent something real to give it. 2 days passed. Then Karen's constructs touched the edge of my influence. He hadn't sent them before. He'd always come himself. I knew what they were the instant they arrived. Gray shapes moving with administrative certainty, purposeful as paperwork. Probes. He was testing what we'd built before he spent himself on it. The tinker felt the change in the stairwell air before I ran warmth into the stone as warning. He had the maul up and his back to the wall shoulder I'd shaped, feet settled wide, by the time the first construct reached the angle. The angle worked. The construct came down, turned halfway around, exposed, and the tinker hit it twice, and the shepherd's wife's mattock took the rest. It came apart with a sound like ice splitting. 3 more came through the gap it left. The line held at the arch, Pemmel braced there with 2 of the other denizens, the merchant behind them with a hand axe. But the second construct was faster than the first, and it found the seam between Pemmel and the wall. Martin was holding the inner passage behind the arch. He saw the gap open. He stepped into it. He said something. I don't know what. By the time the sound would have reached my sense of the room, he was already falling, and the construct was already coming apart under the tinker's maul, and the last 2 were retreating back up the stairs into Karen's cold, pulled back cleanly, recalled. A test. Nothing more than a test. The room held the silence.
Hearth Mana. Fear state. Pool suppressed. Current tally. 47 of 75.
Martin had come back through a fear aura built to stop him. He'd stepped into a gap he didn't have to close, for a place he'd slept in twice, for a core he'd never seen. That was what loyalty bought. Not safety, not guarantee, just someone willing to spend themselves when the gap opened. I counted, 47, spent on the defensive angles, on holding warmth high enough through the fight to keep people thinking. 47, against what Karen had just demonstrated with constructs alone. Probes, not his real effort, not the severing that had stripped my outer rooms, not whatever he would bring when he came himself. 3 constructs had nearly folded the line. His assault would be Karen, and the constructs, and the severing, all at once. Same math, every direction. 40 mana short of anything that ended this cleanly. 40 below my pool's ceiling, which meant I couldn't accumulate enough by morning, no matter how many careful breaths my guests slept through. The merchant and the shepherd's wife moved Martin to the far room without being asked, quiet and careful. The young woman with the embroidery sat against the hearthstones with her hands around her knees, and didn't speak. The tinker lowered himself against the wall, maul across his thighs, and stared at the stairs. The fang-crawled juvenile crossed the room and settled against the tinker's side without invitation. The tinker glanced down at it once, then didn't look away from the stairs. Pemmel came to the hearthstones and sat very still. After a long silence it said,
He'll come at first light. He won't probe again.
We both knew the shape of Karen's pattern by now.
I know,
I said. The stone held the warmth as long as I could hold it. Outside, the pass went dark the way mountains go dark, complete, without comment, and my count stayed at 47. And dawn was the deadline, and Karen would come with it, and he would not send constructs ahead of him to test us first. Chapter 13. The Bequest. Dawn came through the ground. Not light. Light was a surface thing, and I was stone, but a drop in temperature along the outer walls, a settling of frozen timber that ran through every beam I still held. The pass had been quiet for hours. 47. Mana. I had turned it over all night without adding to it. The fear aura on my stairs dissolved at first light. Clean, deliberate. Karen called it home because he wouldn't need it where he was going. He was at the top of my stairs before I understood what that meant. Martin held the arch with the old axe across his knees, the man who had come back a 3rd time, and somewhere between the first night and the 3rd, decided that was enough to count as home. Talia stood at the stairbase angle I'd shaped into the stone, the forced sideways bottleneck, the shoulder cut into the wall. The others held the far stone, the shepherd's wife, the merchant, the young woman who'd left an embroidery in the alcove. Every one of them had pushed through Karen's aura to be here. That weight settled into my walls the same way their footsteps had, over 28 days. Pemmel sat at the hearthstones and did not move. Karen came down the stairs the way he did everything, without hurry, without waste. His registry gray had gone darker in the pre-dawn cold, and the assize scales at his throat caught the coal's light first. He stopped at the stair bend and looked at the people arranged against him, at Martin's axe, at the stone angles. His expression didn't shift.
You've had time,
He said.
You chose this.
Not an accusation, a record being noted. He raised his right hand and pressed his palm to the outer passage wall. Romy. The room he'd already severed, and my influence contracted. Cut, the way a thread pulls through a needle's eye and is simply gone. The first room went dark in an instant. No warmth, no weight, no sense of the cold pressing through the stone. Just absence, the shape of something I no longer held. Martin surged forward from the arch. The denizens came from the corners, from the niches Pemmel had stationed them in, moving in the angles rather than lines, using the walls the way Pemmel had taught them. They were small. They moved with the particular quality of things made for company rather than combat, and they held the passage longer than they had any right to, because they knew every stone of it from the inside. The fang-crawl juvenile, no one's denizen, no one's soldier, just the creature Karen had caged and left on my floor, came out of the hearthroom without being asked, and closed the gap at the arch. Karen extended his other hand. The assize authority rolled through my walls like a tide withdrawing from sand. 3 more rooms gone in the space of an exhale. Before I finished counting them, the weight of them pulling back through stone that had been mine a moment before. My influence snapped back to the hearth room, and the stair base, and the alcove above, and nowhere else. 44 mana, then 42, as the upkeep continued its patient work. I poured 10 mana into the floor at the stair base, trying to raise a counter angle, and his authority dissolved it before the stone finished moving. 32. My shaping came apart in his hands like chalk in rain. Martin's axe came down once and turned something gray. And then Karen moved through the gap in the line, the way a current moves through a break in a dam, meeting nothing. And Martin went down on my hearthroom floor. His warmth left my stones while the axe was still settling.
Hearth Mana, suspended. Cause, guest fatality.
29 mana. He was 4 steps from my hearthstones. Talia stepped in front of my core, in front of the hearthstones where my attention was anchored, the center of everything I still held, mattock handle in hand, and blood-dried brown on her sleeve, and she planted her feet on my floor.
Step aside,
No.
She said.
there's nothing here left to protect.
He glanced at the hearthstones, at the coals guttered almost to nothing.
The core is spent. Whatever it built is done.
He was right. 29 mana and a room. The stone I still held was almost small enough to cradle in both hands, if I'd had hands. Karen was 3 steps from ending it. Then Pemmel moved. It crossed to the hearthstones slowly, the way it always moved, deliberate and unhurried, the shape I'd made in the dark on the second morning, to fill the silence with a voice. It climbed onto the stone at the center of the room, onto my core, and sat down in the posture I had seen every night of my existence, legs folded, weight settled, a comforter at rest.
I know what you are.
It said, past Karen, to me, careful, steady, the voice of a made thing that had decided warmth was worth the cost of being.
And I know you'll leave the doors open this time.
Open, not barred,
Don't let go of them.
it said. And then it gave itself, the way Aldrich had given himself, between one breath and the next, a small warmth that had simply decided it was finished. The absence moved through me the way Aldrich's had, my own breath stopping, but longer this time, because this one had been mine. This one I had made from my own intent on the second morning, and it had turned out to be a comforter instead of a weapon, and it had never once apologized for that.
Bequest, given willingly and in love. Mana plus 46. Tribute, 135 of 100. Remittance complete.
The pool flooded from 29 to the edge of capacity, and stopped there, full, pressing against the limits of what I could hold like light behind glass. 75 mana. My cap. Every drop of what I was. Pemmel was gone. I moved. I moved the way a place moves when it has been shaping and tending and pouring warmth into its stones for 28 days and has finally run out of reasons to hold back. Every stone was mine, in a way Karen's authority could sever from the outside, but could not erase from within. The floor at the arch rose 2 inches without warning, not enough to break a stride, exactly enough to redirect one. The passage bend he'd walked through narrowed at both shoulders so he couldn't choose which wall to brace against. The stair base angle locked. Stone flowing from the wall, from the floor, from the section of ceiling I'd been quietly working since Pemmel started crossing the room. What I wanted was to hold him, not destroy him, the way I had always held the people inside my walls. There was a difference between those two things, and I spent every remaining mana on it. He moved fast. He was a tribute knight of the Third Circuit, with a career of dungeons in his hands, and he did not panic. He got one arm free, and the Assize authority crackled against my shaping, and 3 mana went to nothing. I poured 4 more into the counter. 68. The count dropped through the 50s as he struck the wall, and the wall gave an inch, and I pushed it back, and he struck again. 49. At 37 mana, I sealed the passage above his shoulder. the angle of ceiling I'd been holding in reserve, and the stone came across, and Karen, tribute knight of the Third Circuit, the man who had culled Milden's fork, and believed all the way to his bones that he was doing a mercy, went to one knee on my floor. Alive, held, pinned on one knee by my own stone, one hand braced against a wall that would not yield, the assize scales at his throat pressing cold against his collarbone. The room went quiet. Talia lowered the mattock handle. The shepherd's wife had both hands pressed against her face. The merchant stood against the far wall with his eyes moving from Karen to the hearthstones, to the empty place where Pemmel had been, measuring that absence against everything he'd seen in this room over 3 visits. My pool sat at 29 mana, the tribute tally at 135. Martin was on my floor, and Pemmel was nowhere in my stones, and I held the fire on the hearthstones because I didn't know what else to hold. After a long time, Karen said,
I didn't know it could do this.
He said it to the room, an assessment, the same professional register he'd used when he pressed the assize stone to my outer wall, when he'd offered me the cage as an easy life. But something had shifted in the cadence of it. The voice of a man whose certainty had briefly found no floor.
Neither did she,
Talia said.
Culling protocol, suspended. Officiating knight incapacitated. Assize tribunal review required.
Outside, the pass lightened the way mountain passes lighten, slowly and grudgingly, gray to pale blue. The doors were open. New steps would come when the light came fully. They always came when the pass opened. The alcove above held warmth and the shape of something absent that had known what I was before I did. And Martin's cot by the arch held only the impression of a man who had given me his name on the 3rd night, and then, on the 28th, given me more than that. But the doors were open. A defeated tribute knight on my floor, pinned in my stone, was not something the assize could file and forget. Chapter 14. The Register. The stone held. Karen's breathing came through it, shallow, controlled. The kind a man uses when he's mapping the walls of a trap and deciding not to call it one yet. The hearthroom had gone very quiet. Talia stood at the arch, one hand pressed flat to her bandaged arm. The fang-crawled juvenile sat on the warm hearthstones 3 feet from Karen's pinned hand, watching him the way it had watched the cage bars, patient, wary, not yet sure. The system had gone silent after its last panel. A tribute knight incapacitated on my floor. There had to be a next step. The system opened a review. 6 hours for Karen to file his report. Or face inquiry of his own. 6 hours. Whatever came after would come then. Karen turned his head as far as the stone allowed. Not far.
You didn't kill me,
he said. He was reading something off a page he hadn't expected to find. I shaped my answer through the hearthstone. 2 mana that left me at 27.
No.
The power that stopped me.
He paused.
That wasn't yours.
It was given.
He went still the way a man goes still when something he thought he understood turns out to be different on the inside. The scar along his jaw caught the firelight, running jaw to ear, pale against weathered skin. Something had put it there. Something that survived him, which meant Karen had his own collection of things that had almost won.
The mossling,
he said.
Pemmel.
The scar moved when his jaw set. He looked at the hearthfire for a moment, not at me.
I've taken reports for 11 years.
Longer pause this time.
There is no column for a bequest.
The 6 hours passed in a quiet I didn't know what to do with. Talia brought Karen water. She set it on the stone within his reach, said nothing, and he said nothing back, and neither of them looked at the other while he drank it. The fang-crawled juvenile eventually lowered its chin to its forelegs and watched the fire. The 3 guests who had lived through the night stayed in the alcove above, moving occasionally, murmuring. I didn't reach up to catch the words. They were in my walls and breathing. That was enough. At the 5-hour mark, Karen asked to write. I loosened the stone around his right hand until he could move it. He scratched something on the inside of his wrist, registry seal script too small and too formal for me to parse, and the assize stone disc on my outer wall pulsed once, faint blue, and whatever he had written went with it. The system noted it. Report received. Review continuing. A log shifted in the fire. The juvenile's ear twitched toward the sound and stilled.
Delinquent status. Under review. Culling protocol suspended pending classification.
Suspended. Not revoked. Not cleared. The assize had encountered something it didn't know where to file, and its answer had been to pause the clock rather than run it out. I released Karen at noon, because holding him after the suspension would have meant something I didn't want to mean. He stood slowly, brushed stone dust from his coat, and took in the hearthroom the way he had the first time he came down my stairs. Careful, thorough, unhurried.
You'll receive a classification assessor within 30 days. Not a night. They want to observe the Hearth Mana. Document it properly.
He picked up his surcoat from where it had fallen.
I told them what I saw. All of it.
And Milden's fork?
Talia hadn't shifted from the arch since morning.
Already in the record.
He met her eyes when he said it.
It stays.
He left before the light shifted. I tracked him through the stone of the pass, until the step pressure went faint, then fainter, then nothing. A man who had spent 11 years keeping an honest ledger, and had just written a report that didn't fit it. I held that without trying to finish it. Some things don't close. The alcove still smelled of moss and held Pemmel's shape in the stone, the grooves in the corner wall, the indent where it had pressed itself against the fox on the second night. I had shaped Pemmel from my own intent, which meant everything it had been, it had found somewhere in me first. The patience, the instinct to tend a thing rather than finish it. Martin's cot by the arch held only the shape of a man, pressed into the straw. I put more wood on the fire, not because the hearthroom was cold. They came in the late afternoon, a couple with the heavy packs of people who had planned for weather. The woman stopped at the top of my stairs. The deterrent was long gone from the stone, but the stairwell carried the memory of it still, something residual in the walls I hadn't been able to scour out. She came down anyway. Her husband followed. When the warmth reached them, their shoulders dropped at the same moment, a single low exhale, and the woman made a sound in her throat she probably didn't know she made. The shepherd's wife came down from the alcove and greeted them, before I could introduce anything. This was how the hollow worked now. Guests welcoming guests, familiarity passing itself forward. 2 mana, quietly. The first gain since Pemmel, 29 in the pool. The tribute tally held at 90 of 100. The assize had suspended collection along with the cull. Whether the debt still stood was, presumably, a thing the assessor would determine. Then the system spoke again, and the words went further than my walls.
Registry notice. All tribute circuits. Classification review. Opened for Hearth-type anomaly cores. Observation protocol in effect. Hearth Mana data flagged for formal study. First inclusion in the kill yield ledger, pending assessor determination. See attached. Incident report. Wren's Hollow. 3rd Circuit.
Kill yield ledger. First inclusion pending. They were not filing me under an existing column. They were opening a new one, and the first entry in it was my name. The assessor would come. The tally sat unpaid. Whatever the new column meant for the debt, for the bequest, for the standing question of whether Hearth Mana could settle what assize tribute had always answered in blood, none of that would resolve before dawn. Very little of it might ever. New steps on the stairs. A third traveler, alone, who had come up behind the couple and followed their light down into the dark. He stopped in the arch and pulled back his hood and looked around the hearthroom with the slow expression of a man who had heard something, somewhere, and come to see if it was true.
The fire's warm.
I said through the hearthstone.
And the doors are open.
He came in.